Okay, so now we're talking about these hypokinetic diseases. The first thing to ask is, are we really less active? So again, hypokinesis, hypo meaning less, kinesis meaning movement, together means that we have lower than normal or insufficient physical activity. All right, and so that's the idea of this idea is that you're not moving enough. And what happens when we don't move enough? So are we really that inactive? Well, if we look at where we were before, so Paleolithic, so the paleo diet was from this idea that Paleolithic people were how we were evolved to be, or current modern US adult averages from 2010, so that's even 10 years ago. But if you look about 20,000 years ago, men were going about 16,000 steps a day. Women were going about 10,000, a little over 10,000 steps per day. If we look at Amish people who have maintained a kind of a traditional lifestyle, they're still highly active, at least as far as 18, 20 years ago. But when we look at other reports of U.S. activity levels, what we're looking at even 10 years ago, men were down to 5,000 steps per day, and women were under 5,000 steps per day. So really, over these last 20,000 years, where everybody's, paleo diet because we didn't used to eat carbohydrates. Well, the bigger thing is that we used to actually be 2 to 3 times more active. So yes, we are far less active than we were when our bodies were under these evolutionary stresses that we talked about the last time. So how much physical activity is normal? So this is a survey that they did, the CDC, Center Disease Control. Everybody knows what CDC is now because they're the ones who are tracking the coronavirus and make us stay home. But if you look in 2017, the CDC measured physical leisure time activity, and they said, what percentage of adults engage in no leisure time physical activity? You look here, 30 to 50%. Puerto Rico is in that range. If you look at 30 to 35%, there's a huge swath of the country that is looking like they don't actually do any leisure time physical activity. We happen to be in one of the more active areas, and that's understandable because many of the places that you look, if you look here, the West Coast, Colorado and Utah, these are the places where there's lots of incredible national parks, there's lots of great activity. And so it's not surprising that many of those people are staying active. But the reality is most of the country here isn't physically active even 1 time per week. The current guidelines of what we should be doing from the American Heart Association and the American College of Sports Medicine, a minimum of 150 minutes of moderate endurance activity a week, 2 muscle strengthening sessions per week. So a minimum of 150 minutes per week. That means the idea of this moderate endurance activity, that's just walking. And if we divide this up into 5 days, that's 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. That's not much. That's barely any activity. 2 strength sessions, very few people are doing the 2 strength sessions. Even if they can get out and do some walking, do some kind of endurance type activities, they're not getting in the strength sessions. How many people aren't getting in this? Well, if we look and say how many Americans reach those levels of physical activity proposed by the American Heart Association and ACSM, 50%. Oh, good. We got 50% of the people doing it here. But there's nothing where you see a higher group because it's 50% or below are doing this. So most here in the green, we're at about 30 to 40%. And then if you go again into Puerto Rico, again, what this is showing is that there's a bunch of things here. One of them is opportunity to be active. And another is the social component. The social component is really important. In areas where the social norm is not to be a physically active individual, we see that physical activity levels are much, much lower.